We could be just hours away right now from the U.S. Supreme Court's decision on Arizona's controversial immigration law. That law went into effect on July 29, 2010. Under it, police must ask for an ID if there is reason to believe, they have to have reasonable suspicion that someone they have stopped is in this country illegally. Racial profiling is not allowed. Under federal law, legal resident aliens are already required to carry registration cards. The Arizona governor signed the law, she says, because she believes there's a lack of federal enforcement. But before we even get a decision from the Supreme Court, opponents of that Arizona law are already laying the foundation to shut the law down through other means if it survives scrutiny at the highest court in the land. Joining me now, Leslie Marshall, who's a syndicated radio talk show host and a Fox News contributor, and Lars Larson, who is a syndicated radio host with Compass Media Networks. And so there is another case known as Friendly House versus Whiting. And our viewers may remember that despite the president warning that you would go for an ice cream and you get pulled over and asked for your papers in Arizona as a result of this law, when the government challenged it, they never claimed racial profiling or discrimination. That was not and is not the basis on which they challenged it. And yet there's another case that does raise that issue. And Lars, the plan is apparently, if the high court upholds the law as challenged by the feds, all bets will be in on Whiting, on Friendly House versus Whiting.
Well, you understand what's going on here. The president is trying to pander to Hispanic voters. He did it last Friday with his unconstitutional and illegal move to simply avoid enforcing the law. And now he's told his Justice Department to go after states like Arizona. And it doesn't matter how many cases they lose, they're going to keep on doing this. But it really does a disservice to legal residents of the United States, whether they're Hispanic or from any other place on planet Earth. The fact is that the laws should be enforced. And what's strange about this to me is California, for instance, has very strict environmental laws that go way above the federal laws and the EPA. And you don't see the government suing California saying you can't enforce our environmental laws in California or have laws that are even tougher. Yet with Arizona, they say, no, you as a state cannot enforce the federal laws that are on the books that the government, the U.S. government, chooses not to enforce, and you can't have tougher laws.
Well, the legal standard is if a state law is consistent with the federal law, then it can stand. If it is inconsistent with the federal regime, then it cannot stand. That is how the feds draw the distinction between the two scenarios you just painted.
But what's inconsistent about 1070?
Well, that's the whole argument. We can get into that another time, but they're split on that. Leslie, I want to ask you, because not only now is there this other case, it's not brought by the feds, it's brought by civil rights groups and so on, other people who oppose the Arizona law, but not only are they pursuing that case, and they hope to get an order from a judge in that case blocking this law if the Supreme Court upholds it on discrimination grounds, but they're also now threatening to sue police officers for racial profiling before anybody's done any profiling whatsoever.
Well, listen, one of the problems that I have, Megyn, I am not an attorney, but I am a citizen. I was born here, and yes, I do have my birth certificate. But in the state of Arizona, what is reasonable suspicion? I mean, there are certainly Americans who are not white. There's certainly Americans who have accents. And I have to say, if I had a broken down truck with a lawnmower in the back, I would be frightened in the state of Arizona. I do think this reeks of racial profiling. And Lars, I disagree with you, because this is essential for American citizens. It is the responsibility of the federal government to make sure at any cost that they protect and uphold our civil rights, that there is not discrimination for American citizens.
But did you find it odd? Did you find it odd then? And I'll get to you in a second, Lars, but did you find it odd then, Leslie, that when the feds sued over this law, they declined to pursue it as a civil rights matter?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I did. To be honest, I did. And I'm not surprised, quite frankly, by this additional suit being brought, because this is a war, and this is the first step in a battle. Additionally, Lars, look at the facts. 3% of the illegal population of America is in Arizona. 3%. And in addition to that, illegal immigration is down. And you can thank President Obama for that, Lars, due to increased deportations. And since you blame him for unemployment in the economy, that bad thing is actually bode well for a reduction in illegal immigration.
But let me just say this, Lars. Even though there are some examples of legitimate, citizens, American citizens, getting stopped in some instances, there are also stories like that of Phoenix police officer Nick Erfel, who was killed by an illegal immigrant who shot him as he tried to arrest him on a warrant. The guy was released from prison and he was deported, but he sneaked back into the country and then eventually got arrested again and wasn't reported to the federal immigration. So the system does not always work, and that's the frustration of some in Arizona and some in the rest of the country, Lars.
Megyn, out where I live in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon and Washington, we have some of the ugliest crimes. A couple of nuns that were strangled, raped, and murdered by an illegal alien who was a, catch and release case where the federal government let him go. This is before Obama. But this has been going on for more than a decade. Some of the ugliest crimes are happening. And as for racial profiling, I got to tell you, Leslie, like it or not, 65% of the people illegally in this country are of Hispanic origin. So if a police officer pulls somebody over, he isn't necessarily looking at accent or your skin color. What he looks at is he pulls somebody over who has no driver's license, no registration, no insurance. He has a matricula consular card, which can only be possessed by Mexican citizens who happen to make up the majority of that 65% of Latinos who are here illegally. He takes the totality of the circumstances. There's a lawyer phrase for you, Megyn. I'm not even a lawyer. And he looks at it and says, do I suspect this guy is here illegally? Of course you do.
I got to give Leslie the last word on this, but I want to ask you, 5 states, Alabama, Georgia, Indiana, South Carolina, Utah, all followed Arizona's lead. There's a lot at stake in this case. Are we looking at litigation for years to come, no matter what the Supreme Court does on these laws?
I think so, and I think the litigation will make it impossible for all of these states to proceed with their law. And Lars, how does a police officer know that you don't have a license, registration, etc., when they've pulled you over?
Because they ask for those documents. That's what they have a right to do,
After they
Megyn.
pulled you over, so they don't know prior. You're saying this is the only reason they
go
pulled
on a
them
few
over.
ride-alongs and you'll learn something like I did years ago.
Rare snap.
Love
Leslie,
you, mean it.
Lars, thank you both so much.